You will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of National Defense Abdelmajid Tebboune has chaired a cabinet meeting devoted to several sectors of activity. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, has announced that it will issue its decision tomorrow, Friday, on urgent measures requested by South Africa, which lodged a complaint against the Zionist entity for genocide against the Palestinian people. And the barbaric Zionist genocidal aggression on the besieged Gaza Strip has entered its 111th day with continued air, land and sea bombardments against the defenseless Palestinian civilians, public infrastructure, private property and UN-sponsored facilities. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First in our news, the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of National Defense, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has chaired a meeting of the Council of Ministers to hear presentations on the status and compensation schemes in the higher education sector, the progress of the oilseed crushing project of Kutama in Jijel, and the plugin and sowing campaign for the 2023-2024 season, according to a press release from the Presidency of the Republic. The details with our colleague Asya Bakar.
The Council of Ministers approved the presentation by the Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research on the benefits of civil servants belonging to the special bodies in this sector. President Tebboune said during the meeting that the oilseed crushing project in Jijel will enter the actual production phase next June, adding that this will be a major boost to the national production capacity and supply of oil to the market. After listening to a presentation by the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development on the progress of the ploughing and sowing campaign for the 2023-2024 season, the President of the Republic stressed the imperative need to support professionals in the agricultural sector through the introduction of cutting-edge techniques and a change of mentality to generate wealth in this strategic sector on which the state is focusing as part of the development of the national economy. The President of the Republic also encouraged farmers to make the most of the benefits granted by the state and generalize the use of scientific means. President Tebboune ordered the encouragement of agricultural investment in the south as it has all the necessary conditions and potential, while speeding up the regularization of cases that have been pending for years with regard to land development. The Council of Ministers, chaired by the President of the Republic, also approved a direct agreement contract for the expansion of the port of Annaba and the construction of a railway line. This contract was approved because of its urgent nature. The President of the Republic praised the efforts made by the Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research and the Minister of Knowledge Economy, Startups and Micro-Enterprises as part of their joint efforts to ensure high-level coordination between the two sectors and for the economic dynamics created according to the same source.
And the International Court of Justice, ICJ, has announced that it will issue its decision on Friday on urgent measures requested by South Africa, which has lodged a complaint against the Zionist entity for genocide targeting Palestinians in Gaza. The court, the UN's highest court, could potentially order the Zionist entity to halt its ongoing war in Gaza, which began on October 7 last year. Radio Algeria International contacted human rights lawyer and international law expert Francis Boyle from Chicago, who spoke about the trial.
I have reviewed the application and the request for provisional measures of protection by the Republic of South Africa, and I also heard the 6 hours of oral argument before the World Court. My opinion, based on my knowledge, judgment, and experience, as a straight-out legal matter, the Republic of South Africa should win an order against Israel to cease and desist from committing all acts of genocide against the Palestinians. But I do want to point out that massive pressure is being brought to bear on the judges of the court to rule in favor of Israel. So I'm just speaking here as a straight-out legal matter based on my knowledge, judgment, and experience having won these three orders to the Bosnians.
And you will be able to listen to the full interview with international law expert Francis Boyle from Chicago right after the end of this bulletin. And the savage Zionist genocidal aggression on the besieged Gaza Strip has entered its 111th day with continued air, land, and sea bombardments against the defenseless Palestinian civilians, public infrastructure, private property, and UN-sponsored facilities. Meanwhile, the United Nations has denounced a blatant violation of the laws of war after a strike on a refugee camp sheltering displaced persons in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip on Wednesday. Said Bouhazi has more details.
Dozens of Palestinian civilians, including children and women, have been killed and many others wounded, particularly in the city of Khan Yunis, which has witnessed over the past days intense artillery shelling and ongoing airstrikes, resulting in the killing of several Palestinians and causing scores of injuries. At least 3 civilians, including 2 children, were today killed following intense Zionist airstrikes targeting As-Sittar al-Gharbi area north of Khan Yunis, according to local and security sources. Sources said that occupation tanks and military vehicles continue their siege of El Amal Hospital and the Palestinian Red Crescent's headquarters in Khan Yunis amid an ongoing barrage of heavy gunfire and artillery shelling in the vicinity of the hospital. In the meantime, the United Nations has denounced what it called a flagrant violation of the laws of war after a strike on a refuge sheltering displaced persons in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip, which left 9 dead and 75 injured. UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini slammed the Zionist occupation's direct targeting of a training center run by the UN agency UNRWA as a blatant disregard of the basic rules of war, saying that some 30,000 people are sheltering at the site and the death toll could be higher. He underlined that the compound is a clearly marked UN facility and its coordinates were shared with the occupation authorities as we do for all our facilities, as he put it. The humanitarian situation continues to worsen in the besieged Palestinian territory while discussions are underway in Cairo on a possible new truce. According to the Hamas Ministry of Health, hospitals have received at least 125 bodies of people killed in Israeli bombardments in the early hours of Wednesday in Khan Yunis and elsewhere in the Gaza Strip.
And now the World Health Organization, WHO, has revealed that 7 out of 24 hospitals were partially working in northern Gaza and suffered from a lack of staff and supplies. In a press release, WHO stated that the situation of the hospitals in Khan Yunis is catastrophic and indescribable, adding that hundreds of thousands of civilians in the north of Gaza and throughout the Gaza Strip are still deprived of aid. In a professional assessment, the number of martyrs in the Gaza Strip stands at 25,700, the majority of whom are women and children, and around 63,740 wounded, while more than 8,000 others are still missing under the rubble and on the roads, with ambulance crews unable to reach them since the start of the Zionist occupation aggression on October 7. And humanitarian coordinator and interim for the occupied Palestinian territory, James McGoldrick, visited the besieged Gaza Strip, which has been under the brutal attack by the Israeli occupied forces. He spoke to newsmen from Al-Quds on the humanitarian situation in Gaza and said the following.
I was in Gaza yesterday, in the last 3 weeks since arriving in Palestine. Each time I go there, you see the situation deteriorates even further. Massive numbers of civilians have arrived in Rafah itself, which is on the border with Egypt. They're fleeing hostilities in different parts of Gaza. We've got serious issues of overcrowding in the streets, people building shelters, erecting tents. The squalid conditions you see inside the shelters and inside these areas, there's over the unsanitary conditions. There's people using contaminated water, and there's sort of outbreaks of respiratory infections, of hepatitis A, diseases that were eradicated from Gaza before. And we have meningitis, and we have other types of illnesses that are appearing.
And evoking the humanitarian situation, particularly in Khan Yunis, Mr. McGoldrick said that the ongoing hostilities by the Israeli occupation forces have deteriorated the living conditions of the Palestinians in this area.
People are fleeing the hostilities which are still ongoing, and most recently in the Khan Yunis area, which is just slightly north of Rafah, there's been a lot of intense fighting by the IDF, who are trying to root out the forces against them there. And as a result, most recently there was an attack on an UNRWA training centre in Khan Yunis. It's been sheltering 10,000 displaced people, and they've just been hit recently in the afternoon just now, and mass casualties are taking place. Some buildings are ablaze, and there's reported of deaths. Many people are trying to flee the scene but unable to do so. We've sent a medical team there to do an assessment of that situation, and there'll be a statement quite soon about what they found in that visit to the area. But that's indicative of what's happening in this area, and because of that, the population is constantly on the move.
That was humanitarian coordinator and interim for the occupied Palestinian territory, James McGoldrick. And the Nasser Hospital, also known as the Nasser Medical Complex in besieged Khan Yunis, has run out of food, anesthetics and painkillers. The Palestinian Health Ministry has said the health and humanitarian situation in the hospital is extremely catastrophic because of the siege by the Israeli occupation forces. From New York, UN Secretary General spokesman Stéphane Dujarric spoke in a briefing about the situation in and around the hospital.
Hostilities are continuing in the vicinity of Al Nasser Hospital. An international emergency medical team deployed at the hospital tells us that no one can enter or exit the facility due to the ongoing bombardments. Health staff are also reported to be digging graves on hospital grounds due to a large number of fatalities anticipated and the need to manage the burials. Meanwhile, so far in January, World Food Programme says it has reached 930,000 affected people with food assistance across Gaza. In addition, WFP distributed canned meats, biscuits, wheat flours to more than 13,000 people in the northern governments of Gaza.
That was UN Secretary General spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric. The Palestinian Commission for Resistance Against the Wall and Settlements has recorded more than 120 attacks by Zionist settlers on Palestinians in the occupied West Bank since the beginning of the war, the year. In the meantime, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has underlined in Ramallah, following a meeting with British Prime Minister David Cameron, the necessity to put an immediate end to the Zionist aggression waged for over 3 months now by the Zionist occupation against the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Saad Bougazi gives us more details.
The head of the Palestinian Commission for Resistance Against the Wall and Settlements, Muayyid Shaban, said that since the beginning of this year, Jewish settlers have carried out around 120 attacks in the West Bank against Palestinians, the most recent of which was the murder of young Palestinian Tawfiq Ajaq, aged 17, near the town of Al-Mazra'a Al-Sharqiyya, east of the city of Ramallah. On Tuesday, settlers set fire to a number of properties belonging to Palestinians in the village of Beitin, northeast of Ramallah. According to the same official, the significant increase in settler attacks over the past week is the result of the assurances they received from the occupation authorities that they are protected and immune from any trial or punishment that might be imposed on them. Shaban underlined that the danger of this stage lies in the fact that the instructions for carrying out attacks are now issued by the decision-making centers of the occupying Zionist entity. Meanwhile, President Mahmoud Abbas has briefed in Ramallah the visiting British Foreign Minister David Cameron on the latest developments in the occupied Palestinian territories, especially in the Gaza Strip. President Abbas stressed the immediate urgency to stop the Zionist aggression against the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank, including Jerusalem. He also affirmed the necessity of speeding up the introduction of humanitarian aid into Gaza and enabling shelter centers and hospitals to do their duty of alleviating the suffering of civilians.
And at the end of his mission in New York, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, was received by the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, to whom he conveyed the greetings of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, according to a statement from the ministry on Wednesday. On this occasion, Ahmed Attaf reaffirmed to the UN General or Secretary General Algeria's consideration and support for his efforts and steps to put an end to the barbaric aggression and human tragedy suffered by our Palestinian brothers in the besieged Gaza Strip. The meeting provided an opportunity to review the developments in the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, the latest developments in the crises in Libya and the Sahel-Saharan region, as well as the question of Western Sahara. For his part, Antonio Guterres praised the positive role played by Algeria in its regional environment and its contribution as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council to finding peaceful solutions to these crises, which are shaking security and stability at the regional and international levels. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has held in New York a number of bilateral meetings with his counterparts from France, Turkey, Austria and Switzerland, and with the British Minister of State for the Near East, North Africa, South Asia, the United Nations and the Commonwealth as part of the mission he is carrying out in New York on behalf of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, according to a press release issued on Wednesday. And the Moroccan occupying forces have expelled the Sahrawi activist Al-Sadiq Al-Batal and his family from the occupied town of Boujdour, the Sahrawi body against the Moroccan occupation has said. According to the organization, Al-Sadiq Al-Batal, accompanied by members of his family, arrived in the town on Monday to take part in a family wedding before the occupation forces raided the house where the activist was staying the following day. The source said that the occupation forced the activist and his family to leave the town. Al-Sadiq was accompanied by his son, Walid Al-Sadiq Al-Batal, a former Sahrawi political prisoner and journalist. And to wrap up this news bulletin, as I said before, an interview with human rights lawyer and law expert who was the first lawyer to win a case at the International Court of Justice, Francis Boyle, to tackle South Africa's genocide case against the Israeli occupation. So we can listen to it together, and as for me, for the news bulletin, we can come back tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Until then, stay tuned to Radio Algeria International, and bye-bye for now.
Our Talk, a weekly program with guests activating in different fields.
Hello, dear listeners, and welcome on our waves. The South African government brought a case against the Israeli occupation on December 29, accusing it of genocidal acts in its assaults on Gaza. South Africa has accused the Israeli occupation of violating the 1948 Genocide Convention. The two-day hearing was publicly made, and South Africa is requesting that the International Court of Justice, ICJ, move urgently to prevent the Israeli occupation from committing further crimes in the Strip using provisional measures, essentially an emergency order that can be applied even before the main case begins. To talk about South Africa's case, we have with us from Chicago human rights lawyer and international law expert Francis Boyle, who was the first lawyer to win a case under the Genocide Convention at the International Court of Justice. Mr. Boyle, thank you so much for being with us today.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for having me on, and my best to all my friends in Algeria.
Thank you. Mr. Boyle, the world has watched the hearings, and some international attorneys said that South Africa's genocide case against the Israeli occupation is a game changer. You're saying that?
Well, as you pointed out, I was the first lawyer to win an order from the International Court of Justice on the basis of the Genocide Convention on behalf of my clients, the Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina against Yugoslavia. It was massive and overwhelmingly in favor of the Bosnians. And then I won a second order for the Bosnians to the same effect, September 13th, 1993. Once again, massive and overwhelmingly in favor of the Bosnians. And then I won what is known as an Article 74, Paragraph 4 order from the President of the World Court to the same effect. This is the first time ever that any lawyer had won 2 orders, let alone 3 orders, in one case from the World Court since it was founded in 1921. Now, I have reviewed the application and the request for provisional measures of protection by the Republic of South Africa, and I also heard the 6 hours of oral argument before the World Court. My opinion, based on my knowledge, judgment, and experience, as a straight-out legal matter, the Republic of South Africa should win an order against Israel to cease and desist from committing all acts of genocide against the Palestinians. But I do want to point out that massive pressure is being brought to bear on the judges of the court to rule in favor of Israel. So I'm just speaking here as a straight-out legal matter based on my knowledge, judgment, and experience, having won these 3 orders to the Bosnians.
Mm-hmm. South Africa's nearly 50 lawyers are preparing a separate lawsuit against the U.S. and U.K. governments on the grounds that they are complicit in Israeli forces' war crimes in Palestine. Based on your experience with similar cases at the ICJ, how far can the complicity case go?
Well, of course, the Americans are complicit in violation of Article 3, Paragraph E of the Genocide Convention that clearly criminalizes complicity. But my understanding is these lawyers will be filing private lawsuits. So I don't, they haven't said exactly where they're going to file them. What's going to happen here, I really don't know. But I have done similar work. I did similar work for the Bosnians at the World Court. Pursuant to my advice, President Izetbegovic authorized me to sue Britain for aiding and abetting genocide against the Bosnians in violation of the Genocide Convention. And I had prepared the lawsuit. I was in negotiations with the court for an emergency hearing on my request, and the British then threatened to starve the Bosnians, so the lawsuit was withdrawn. So there is a valid complaint there based on my experience, but where the South African lawyers are going to go with their complaint, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Does South Africa's history with apartheid give it an advantage in knowing how to deal with similar cases?
Well, I certainly, in my case, it did. I was involved in the struggle here in the United States and around the world in the battle against the criminal apartheid regime in South Africa at that time. I won the first case here in the United States of a protest against apartheid South Africa, Chicago versus Streeter, 1985, and I also did some pro bono legal work at the request of the lawyer for the ANC. So, sure, if you've been involved in the struggle against South Africa, Israel, is an apartheid state against not only the Palestinians living in occupied Palestine, but its own Palestinian citizens. And apartheid is a crime against humanity under the Apartheid Convention, just short of genocide in terms of severity.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Boyle, the Israeli occupation has a history of violations of international law, and also the veto has always been a strong card played by its allies to protect its interests and actions. What is the least that can be gained from South Africa's case if the Israeli occupation refuses to abide by the ruling?
Right. Well, assuming South Africa wins, which as a straight legal matter it should. Now, as a political matter, as I said, right now the Americans, the Israelis and Zionists all over the world are, bribing, threatening, intimidating, blackmailing the judges to rule in favor of Israel, just like they did to Goldstone to repudiate and denounce his own report. But assuming they win, then South Africa can take this for enforcement to the UN Security Council. Under the UN Charter, that's what's supposed to happen. The court issues the order, the Security Council enforces it. As you correctly pointed out, so far it appears the Biden administration will veto any enforcement. And if that happens, then South Africa can take it to the UN General Assembly for enforcement there under the terms of the Uniting for Peace Resolution of 1950.
Mr. Boyle, a provisional ruling is expected in a few days, and if the court decides to implement an interim measure, this would put a legal obligation on the Israeli occupation to end the onslaught. The court rulings are final, correct me if I'm wrong, but does the court have the authority to enforce them? And what if the ICJ decides not to implement the interim measure to end the onslaught?
Well, first, the interim measures are the equivalent of a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction. The merits of the case will continue on to a final judgment. Second, it is not for the court to enforce the judgment. It's just like any other court. You go into court, you get your judgment, and you win. If the other party does not comply, you go to the sheriff. And under the terms of the UN Charter, the sheriff is the Security Council. That's what happened with my two orders I won for Bosnia. They then went to the Security Council for enforcement. And if Biden vetoes, then under this Uniting for Peace resolution, South Africa can take it to the UN General Assembly for enforcement. So we'll just have to see what happens. I want to make it clear I'm not advising or working for the Republic of South Africa, but I do advise the Palestinians.
Okay. So now civil society organizations express support for South Africa's genocide case, and the world has been witnessing this kind of awareness that was stemmed or controlled before by the mainstream media. Do you think that the support of civil society, not only to South Africa's case, but also to the Palestinians' right to live in dignity and peace, can stand in the face of the world powers that are blindly supporting the Israeli occupation?
It's going to be tough. There's no question at all about it. We're in the fight of our lives. We're up against the United States government, which is controlled and dominated by Zionists, and their attack dog Israel. So I can't predict how this will turn out, but we have to fight for the sake of the Palestinians. Netanyahu, they want to drive the 2 million Gazans into the Sinai. And then when that's done, they are going to turn onto the West Bank and try to drive them into Jordan. So the Palestinians are facing a second Nakba. The Zionists are going to finish off the work that they started in the first Nakba in 1948. This is what is confronting humanity.
So you think that all the initiatives of the civil society do not have the power to fight this kind of schemes?
They do have the power. They're just going to have to fight. There's no alternative. Civil society has to pressure all of their governments to do more on behalf of the Palestinians. I think there's probably more that could be done. The government there needs to talk to their lawyers and political measures, etc. Yes, and the people have to make it clear that they really want your government to go to bat for the Palestinians.